My grandpa, growing up, every time I did anything in my life, he would tell me, give him hell. It's about being willing to meet yourself in every moment and give everything you've got in what you do. How far am I willing to go to give everything I have while I still have the opportunity to give it?
Are you fully committed? This is what Kate Courtney calls sending it.
Kate Courtney's going to do it here. It's been an unbelievable performance. Gold rush for the USA. Kate Courtney is your 2018 World Champion.
Not only is Kate world champion and an Olympian, she is the face of American mountain biking. But as storied as her career has been, it's also not without its heartbreaking low moments.
The Swiss sweep, it's gold, silver, and bronze for Switzerland. It's like nothing we've seen.
It feels really good to associate your identity with your sport when you're winning. But the gift of coming up short is having clarity in that separation.
Moments that forced her to question her path and re-examine her why, culminating in this recent career-defining move in which personal performance now stands on equal footing with her personal mission to inspire the next generation of female riders. You mentioned legacy earlier. What is the higher purpose distilled down to a single thought?
It's a really good question.
This is a very exciting and pivotal moment in not just your athletic career, but your life. And so I feel very privileged to be able to help you kind of unpack this special time today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's cool. But we have to start with Tom Cruise.
So good place to start.
For anybody who paid even, kind of the slightest amount of attention to the Paris Olympics, you probably saw a video of Tom Cruise, kind of descending into the closing ceremonies of the Paris Olympics to gather the torch, and then smash cut him on an airplane and skydiving, down to the Hollywood sign in Los Angeles, where he then received the torch from you, who was riding up on your mountain bike to hand it off. Or no, he handed it to you, right? And then you rode off and then into the USC stadium where the 1984 Olympics ceremony took place, to then hand it off to Michael Johnson, right? Yeah. And this video, I mean, it must have been seen hundreds of millions of times, if not a billion times. And a lot of people going, who is that person on the mountain bike?
Yeah.
Which was a pretty cool experience. So I need to know everything about this.
Everything about it. It was an unbelievable life experience. I'll just start. I got the call and they said, we'd love to have you be a part of handing off the flag to LA. It's a home Olympics. It's in California, where I grew up. It's also an Olympics that will be very focused on female athletes, of which I am one. And it's also in the state where mountain biking was founded. So mountain biking originated in Marin in the 60s and 70s. So I think those things combined made me a good fit for being a part of it. And of course, that was a huge honor to be asked. But I had very little details. They just said, okay, will you be willing to come with an A-list celebrity? And I was like, okay, an A-list celebrity, I don't know if they'll even know who they are. And then they called me 2 days before the shoot under an NDA and said, oh, by the way, the A-list celebrity is Tom Cruise. And I was like, oh, I've heard of him. And you will need to get my husband an NDA immediately as well, because I'm going to have to tell someone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was this really kind of surreal experience. And to be honest, I'll say, in the interest of transparency, like when I first got the call, I felt this kind of imposter syndrome, like, oh, what if I don't make the team? Like, what if I don't make the team in Paris? Like, do I want to be the face of this? And I got really good advice that in life, you have to take those opportunities, and that those opportunities are a result of who you are and where you are and all of these factors, some in your control and some out of it. And at the end of the day, it was just a really cool thing to get to do. And so I really focused on just enjoying it and being present for it. And I actually took away a few really important lessons from it as well.
Which are?
meeting Tom Cruise is a really unique experience. And being on the set, I'll just say it was hard to go home and not tell all my friends about this, but he flew in like a black chopper, and they look up, oh, Tom's here. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm in a movie. And he had come from shooting in Europe, flew overnight, jumped out of a plane in the middle of the night, comes there at 10 in the morning to film this little scene with me. And as an athlete, like, we travel a bit, we know kind of what it feels like to do that. That's really hard. Like, I know how flashy and fun and cool that might look. That's a really hard physical day to have, right? That's a lot of work. And he showed up on set with joy, like pure, authentic joy for what he was doing. And I think I mentioned something about it, and I said, well, this is fun. And he looked at me and said, it's all fun, isn't it? And to me, that was really impactful to see someone who has already achieved the highest level in their craft, right? Has already done enough. You could fade stage left, live out a great life, but is absolutely hustling because he loves what he does. And you can see it in everything that he did on set that day, giving extra time to like every person who is working on set, knowing that like, okay, he has this light and he can shine it on people. Taking time, asked me if I wanted a photo, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, obviously I do, but I kind of wanted to give you some space. And instead of just like doing it as if it was a big to-do, he did it with joy. And he brought the photographer over and actually, we need to change directions, the light's better. And to me, it was a master class in what it looks like to give everything in what you do.
That tracks with everything I've ever heard from anyone I know who's ever worked with the guy. Like, he brings a level of intensity, but also a hypervigilance of like the presence, that he kind of commands when he's in public, like knowing that everybody, is aware of who he is, and everything that comes out of his mouth and the energy that he's carrying will be, kind of a story that will be told later, but at the same time, it's like, it's not it sort of feels performative, but I think it's really authentic to who he is. And maybe it's something he's cultivated over time, but there's no question that he brings a level of professional athleticism to his work, like the intensity with which he performs these stunts and his level of investment and care in these projects, these huge movies that he makes. It's like undeniable. Like, he is a unicorn in that regard. Like, nobody is doing, what he is doing and executing it at that level. And then to also have that incredibly rigorous schedule and still be exuberant and enthusiastic and kind of share that with other people in that infectious way. It's kind of an amazing thing. Absolutely. He is like an alien in that regard. I don't know if there's anybody else that can do that, pull that off.
No, but it's a good lesson. And it connects to a lot of themes that I've been thinking about in my career at the moment, which is when you're really pursuing something you love and you're trying to be the best at it. I think I've always thought of that as a journey of self-mastery. Like, you get more disciplined, you get more in control, you master yourself in the pursuit of doing this thing well. And I think in this phase of my career and in studying other people who are pursuing mastery in very different arenas, I'm starting to see that it's more about understanding and revealing and expressing something authentic about yourself, which grows harder when you have this structure around it. It grows harder when everyone who meets him has the story to tell about who this person is and how they carried themselves. It's easy to become so shut down in that, but it's really a gift and something to aspire to be able to still be authentically expressing something true through what you're doing.
Yeah. The idea of mastery kind of in a writ large way, not just mastery of being an elite mountain bike racer, but mastery of self, holistically. Your best expression as an athlete will be by virtue of your level of investment in mastering all of you, right? Yeah. Rather than segmenting it. And I think a lot of athletes, that comes with maturity and with, having to face obstacles and losing, big races and things like that, where you get to this point where you're like, okay, what is the why behind this? And how do I weave, who I am into what I do so that these things are not like separated, but like kind of integrated in a way that, raises the tide for, all aspects of my life. And I feel like you're not only like in that process, like you figured that out, or you are kind of advanced in, your ability to kind of like solve that equation for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a process, but I'm learning more. And I think to be able to be learning more at this phase of my career than ever before is actually something that's really exciting. I've been a professional athlete for almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm learning in a different direction in some ways now, which is that zooming out and that kind of holistic approach that hopefully also makes you better at the core thing that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I've said this before, but I think it belies that instinct or that sense that my best performances are going to be unlocked if I like limit my life and just do this one thing and just become maniacal about it. Mm-hmm. And every, exceptional athlete that I've had the privilege to like sit across in this context, kind of will tell you the opposite. Like when their lives are fuller and all of their kind of, values aren't like put in one bucket, but kind of like dispersed across other things in their life that are important, that becomes this unlock for, the level of performance that had always eluded them. I mean, your friend Chelsea Sodaro is an example of that, I think.
I love Chelsea Sodaro. And
I know. You guys, like, your friendship is like my favorite thing. That video of you guys in the matching pink outfits, like when you guys train together, like that's the best.
Well, finding a training partner like that goes a long way in some of these outer challenges of training and trying to get into the physical shape to perform well, but more so on that mental side. And I think it's really grappling with that, right? Like I've heard you say before, there's this instinct that if you like went and lived at altitude by yourself in a cabin in the woods and like only ate rice and only trained and meditated 10 hours a day, you'd be your best. And to be honest, in certain phases of my career, I've done pretty close to that, to try to get an edge, to try to kind of control the outcome and nail it on this one day. And spoiler alert, that really didn't work for me. But I think you have to test those edges. And I think that's the value of pursuing something for a long period of time, is you kind of like test all these different edges and you find the nuance. And I remember there was an interview from Steve Magnus, and Brad Stolberg did an interview once with a famous running coach. And I can't remember his name, but I remember the content of the interview. And they were talking about at the beginning of your career as a coach, you kind of, the basics, right? Okay, you're supposed to do zone 2, you got some intervals, here's generally what you're supposed to do. And over time, you add things in. You try, what's this cold plunge thing about? What if we did this with diet? What if we, incorporated mental training? And you try all these things and you add and add and add and add. And at a certain point, it's too much and you kind of lose the plot. And then I think you take things away one by one and say like, what's really at the core of what it takes to be great, not generally, but like great for N of 1, great for me. Like what does being great look like for Kate Courtney in the XC mountain bike season this year? And what you kind of come back to is a lot of those really simple lessons that maybe a beginning coach knew, but now you have the nuance of why each thing matters and how you can apply them in just the right way to maximize the results.
And as an athlete who is accumulating experience over time, you develop a self-understanding of like what you need, and that relationship with a coach becomes more of a collaborative partnership rather than like, tell me what to do and I do it, right? Like that's a whole evolution as well. I mean, I know you've gone through a couple coaches in your own career. What has that evolution been like for you?
Yeah, coaching is so important. And I think it fits a different role for different athletes depending on their mindset. I love working with a team of experts who know more than I do about their different roles and who can help put together a plan that brings out the best in me. So coaching has always been really, really important for me. I love data, I love numbers, and I love that process of working together. I have gone through 3 coaching changes. I kind of started with a more junior development coach, and that was the right thing at the right time for me. It kind of managed my training load and also the pressure that I was putting on myself. And that was during my early years of racing and into my U23 years, where I was also a full-time student. And I'm really grateful for that period. Looking back, I get a lot of questions from young athletes. Should I be training 20 hours a week, in high school and college? And I took 3 rest days a week when I was at Stanford because I had to. And actually, I think it allowed me to develop as an athlete so that by the time I graduated, I was ready to go to a new level. And that involved a coaching change to Jim Miller, who, has coached a lot of Olympians and world champions and was at USA Cycling at the time. And I remember going into his office when I was 18 and saying, like, I want to go to the Olympics and I want to win a world title. And I actually forgot about that conversation, but he reminded me of it much later. But at that time, I needed someone who really took those goals seriously and was willing to kind of hold the standard of what that took. So a lot of those years for me were about almost overreaching in a productive way, knowing, okay, if I want to be able to compete as an elite racer, like, here's the bar and we're going to keep trying to meet it. And then 2018, 2019, time comes along and we kind of had that formula for meeting that bar and being able to accomplish a lot of those goals. And then I had another coaching change, but maybe it's worth discussing what happens in between.
Well, I think before we even kind of move into that specifically, let's take it all the way back and kind of set the stage here. You mentioned at the outset, California is where mountain biking was originated. That's where it was invented. That's where it started. Not only that, it really originated in Marin County around Mount Tam, which is where you grew up, right? And I remember, I went to Stanford before you were born, but those were the very beginning years of mountain biking. And I remember the first stump jumper bikes and things that were coming out around that time. And Marin cycles, that was a big brand, at the outset of mountain biking. And you were sort of, born into this culture, right? Like, you grew up with your dad tooling you around on Mount Tam. So this was, kind of in terms of your origin story, it's kind of part of your DNA.
It really is. And I think the interesting thing about growing up in a culture is that you don't really appreciate what's unique about it until you grow beyond that and see, oh, there's other ways of doing things. But I grew up in a community where being outside was a huge part of why people lived there. Being out on Mount Tam, whether it was running or hiking or being on your bike, that was not a sport. That was just kind of part of your lifestyle. And for me, I see that as a huge gift because I really fell in love with this kind of adventure, community, spending time outside part of the sport before I ever knew that competitive mountain biking existed. And I really credit that to growing up in an area where that was part of the DNA.
So where did the competition aspect of it enter your life?
In high school. So I grew up doing a lot of different sports, and I would say I was always told I had a lot of hustle, but I was not very good, which is kind of a bad combination because you're already trying very hard and maybe it's just not meant to be. But I think I then discovered trail running and running cross country, and that was kind of the first thing that felt like a real fit. I think I was drawn to the way that work accumulated in an endurance sport. And I think also the mindfulness aspect, being out, just being able to let your mind and body wander a bit on the mountain. I love those things. And so I was looking for a sport to cross train for running in the spring, and my high school had a mountain bike team. And it was part of the NorCal Mountain Bike League. And I joined the team. It was me and 5 guys and did my first mountain bike race. And immediately I was just drawn to not just the training, but the racing itself. And I think that's a feeling I hadn't yet experienced, was that like love of the actual competition piece and of being in the race. That felt very different for me than running or any of these other sports that I'd tried.
Two things. Did you win your first race?
I did win my first race. I was racing in the freshman girls category of the high school mountain bike race.
Second thing, you went to a high school that had a mountain biking team. Like that's like wild, right? Is that like only, in Marin County, or are there high schools with mountain bike teams that I'm just unaware of this?
So the NorCal League was the first. This was quite a while ago that I was a freshman in high school, and we had a mountain bike team. But now that program has grown massively. So NICA, the National Interscholastic Cycling Association, has over 25,000 student athletes across the country. And they have, I'm not sure, there are over 20 leagues. I'm not sure where they are exactly now, but it's an incredible sport for high school aged kids. And I think there's a few dimensions to that. I think it's very family oriented. Families are very involved with going to these races and making them happen. It's a mass start event, so there's room on the start line for everyone. And also cycling uniquely, I think, lends itself to a multitude of goals. So you might want to win the race, but you might want to just go farther or faster than you went last time. You might want to get healthy. You might want to, just have a sport to be a part of. And I think it has a home for all of those different approaches and to fit into people's lives in different ways that I think is really valuable for kids of that age.
Mm-hmm. So you get into it, you start to develop this, interest and passion for the competition aspect of it. And you have a pretty, as far as I can tell, like a kind of a rapid rise in the sport. You enter Stanford in 2013, right?
Yeah.
And at some point shortly thereafter, like you sign your first professional contract, right? So you're a professional athlete as a young student in college.
Yeah, it was not a huge contract. It was for $0 in bonuses. So
yeah, but you can say you were a pro.
I always say that because I think it's important to know, as you understand my mindset at that time. I loved racing my bike, and I was very serious about it, and I was curious about what might be possible for me in the sport, but there wasn't a pathway immediately accessible to me of what it would look like to go and try to make a living doing this. Mm-hmm. And so for me, school was my focus. And it felt like mountain biking was almost my hobby. Like I got to go and do all these races, and I was supported very, very well. That's really what you get from those early pro contracts. You get bikes, you get flown to World Cups, you get mechanics and physios and help making that racing possible. But for me, I think my goals are really driven by me at that time. And I was being given this amazing space while I was in school to have a bit of a positive distraction and to slowly make progress. And so in my 4 years at Stanford, I raced U23 category. So that's 19 to 22. And in the World Cups, I was 8th overall, 4th overall, 2nd overall. And then my last year in school, I won the overall. And so I just got a little bit better every year. And when you're 8th in U23, when you're a freshman in college, there's a big gap between that and making a living as a professional racer in the elite category. When you win the overall, that jump is much smaller and feels much more possible. And so I kind of had this slow trajectory in college where, my perspective changed throughout those 4 years, that it went from being kind of a far off dream to like a real possibility to try and make a go of it.
And during that period of time, were you training on your own, or was there like a group that you would train with, or it was sort of up to you to figure out like how to get that done, right?
Yeah. So it was very individual. I had my coach, Jim Miller, at the time, and I really just followed that training plan and just tried to make everything fit together the best I could. And that's one of the things, there's kind of a benefit and a cost to having a sport like mountain biking that's so individual, is you spend a lot of your time training alone. It also makes it very flexible. And so I think for me at that time, I studying felt like a break from training and training felt like a break from studying. And that makes it sound like a perfect balance. It was often pretty messy and there were trade-offs. But I really enjoyed actually training by myself, being on group rides sometimes, having good training buddies, but being able to just lock in, get it done in the shortest time possible, and get back to work.
Yeah. And you were a hum bio major, right?
Yeah.
I did the hum bio core.
Did you do hum bio?
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my major. I ended up switching to American Studies, but I did the core.
Interesting.
Like, it was a great program.
Shift. The core is very hard. So you probably imagine that sophomore year was a little challenging for
so,
me.
I bring that up only to say, it's, the academic aspect of this is rigorous. So you're balancing those two things at the same time.
Yeah, I have a very distinct memory from that time. It was doing the hum bio core, and there were a lot of group projects and group dynamics, which is actually a very wonderful part of that program, is that you work together with your other classmates. But I remember in the spring, I would go and race the World Cups, and I would miss 3 weeks of a 10-week quarter, which I had to do a lot of bargaining with the teachers to be able to do that. I'm writing extra papers, I'm reading extra books, I'm getting notes. It was certainly hard to even be able to set that up. But I remember I got on my first World Cup podium in Europe. And that was kind of the pie in the sky for me as a U23 rider, is being able to compete in Europe. It's a very Euro-dominated sport at the moment, even though it started in the US. And that was kind of the highest level. And so I get on this podium, I'm in third, I get a trophy. It's super exciting. It's something I've been chasing for a long time. And I went back to the hotel, and I only got internet in the hallway. And I was in the hallway till 3 a.m, trying to do this group project, just crying and getting it done. And to me, it forced me to be so clear on why I was doing everything I was doing, and that I was making a choice. And I think that was really valuable for me at that time, to know that I was making a choice. I'm choosing to do this because I care about it and I love it and I want to succeed and it means a lot to me. I'm also choosing to be in school because I love it and I'm curious about it and it's important to me. And I just had to get through those moments. And it was often really challenging, but also I look back and I had a very full life at that time in a way that was really great.
Yeah. The glamorous life of the fledgling professional athlete. But I will say, in my experience, Stanford is pretty great about accommodating, people like yourself who are balancing sort of competing goals. It's sort of a place that celebrates that. Let's make it work, as opposed to maybe a stodgy, kind of East Coast institution who would say, well, you have to make a choice. Either you're going to do that or you're going to do this, but, we're not going to be flexible. And I feel like one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Stanford is because you could feel that. They're like, oh yeah, we're here to help you, achieve your dreams or, your goals and your ambitions. And, often those things come in all different kinds of shapes and forms that don't fit into the exact kind of paradigm of a university.
Yeah, I think they do a really good job of that. And at the core of it, I think they recognize that having multiple pursuits can actually be very valuable. So having multiple things that you're trying to master or make progress in at one time, being an athlete made me a better student, and being a student made me a better athlete. And I feel that you can really see that at a school like Stanford, where most students have something else that's interesting to them. It's not just about having an outside achievement. It's about having something else that fuels your fire and keeps you really motivated.
So during that period of time when you're going from 8th to, you're working your way up the ladder, was there a specific moment where you're like, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is where I'm going to be placing my focus. I can see a future for myself in this as an athlete.
Absolutely. I think it was really that last year, in 2017, it was my last year as a college student and also as an under 23 racer. And I actually missed the Olympic team in 2016. So it was a decision between me and 2 other athletes. And it was a stay up till midnight and see the team come out situation, right? You're waiting, you're refreshing, and I didn't make the team. And that was honestly pretty devastating for me at the time. I think I knew that my results weren't necessarily quite there yet, but I was also much, much younger than anyone else trying to make the team. And so there was a good chance that I would have been selected. And I missed that opportunity. And so I really got serious that fall. And that's actually, I guess I got the timeline a little wrong here. I actually started training with Jim that year. That was kind of my
But you're
first
like,
year.
I'm not going to let that happen again.
Yeah. So I started training with Jim after that and was like, we need to step up the game. And this last year is kind of my opportunity to see what I'm capable of and if it's worth pursuing this as a career. Of course I wanted to, but it's a little bit of you knock on the door and the door opens or it doesn't.
And unlike track and field or swimming, there's some discretion that comes into play with the Olympic selection process in mountain biking.
Completely.
Yeah.
But
Which
it was
comes into play
really,
later in your career.
It does a little bit.
bit.
But it really, that moment for me, I think clarified my goal. The goal in that moment was I want to go in 2020 and I don't want it to be discretionary. I want to make the automatic selection and I want it to be really clear that I earned a spot on the team. And that really kicked off that kind of next phase. And so the moment when I knew that would really be feasible was when I started the 2017 season, that last year, U23, and I won the first race. And I knew it was possible to be on the podium. I knew I really wanted to be competitive and I was right there, but outright winning that race was a really big step in my career. And it made me feel like those goals were in reach and that the work I was doing was getting me there.
Yeah. So 2017, you graduate from college, you go full-time pro, and then you go on this like sort of epic tear from 17 through 19 where you're just crushing it. Like you're really sending it, right? And you become kind of like the new face of this sport entirely, right? So walk me through like the experience of suddenly kind of winning everything at the highest level and the spotlight that it placed upon you and kind of how that, kind of informed this new, kind of chapter in your career.
Yeah. So I graduated 2018. I'm fully focused on mountain bike racing and I go into my first year of elite racing and I ended up doing a big stage race at the beginning of the year, the Cape Epic. And we won that, which was a big step actually to survive that.
That's a huge multi-day, incredibly rigorous mountain bike race in which you race with a team member. It's a tandem thing.
Yeah. So we were really kind of stretching my limit and I was trying to rise to the occasion of this first year elite. And all year I'm like in the top 10 and I kept getting close. If you were paying close attention, like I'd be with the leaders and then I'd blow up. I'd be with the leaders and then I'd have a flat. I'd be with the leaders and then something would happen. And at the last race of the season at the World Championships, I had one of my best races ever. And I was in second place going into the last lap and was able to make contact with the leader and she made a mistake and I attacked and I won a world championship title. And that moment was something that I hadn't like closed that possibility. It wasn't something that I said was definitely not possible, but I certainly had not expected to win that race. I think my goal, I always set goals in kind of 3 levels. So I had like the bronze level goal is just kind of be top 10, keep the status quo. It's a solid performance. My silver level, like, okay, this would be a step up, was finally get into the top 5. And the like shoot for the moon goal was top 3, like earning a medal. And to win was this kind of breakout moment. And you only really get that once in your career. I think when it's happening, you don't necessarily appreciate that, but that kind of surprise, over delivery, everything comes together. And you've shown that something that felt impossible was possible. It kind of causes this like seismic shift in your career where you can no longer say, oh, I don't know if it's possible to win. Like it's been possible at one point in your career. And now the goal is to back that up.
Hey, everybody, pay attention because this episode is sponsored by Squarespace.
So Squarespace has been a long-time partner of the show, and what I love about it is it just demystifies everything about what's required to make a website.
With Squarespace's new Blueprint AI, it's actually like having a design partner who reads your mind. And, look, I know there's a lot of hype out there, a lot of slinging when it comes to emerging AI tools, but Blueprint really delivers. For example, you can share a few goals, and then it just automatically generates all this personalized content that actually feels authentically you. And for tech challenge creators like myself, they've got this drag and drop editing feature that makes the whole process surprisingly intuitive. So check it out. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/richroll to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. I am a total gearhead, and I've learned that people often overlook apparel. But what you wear isn't just clothes. It is, without a doubt, technology that can make or break a performance. And I can tell you that On is innovating in this space like no other, with next-gen premium fabrics and just this heightened level of sophistication and intentionality previously unheard of that puts them just miles beyond the competition. I've been rocking On's high-performance running apparel, all super lightweight, tailor fit, built to move, and just gorgeous to get you out and get it done in fleet-foot comfort, no matter the weather. I'm super proud to be a brand partner with this impressive team. Truly Swiss innovation at its finest. To get you moving, On is offering an exclusive 10% discount. To redeem, head over to on.com/richroll and sign up for On's newsletter. So it's 2019. You're killing it. You're at the top of your game. You're like a coiled spring, right? And then the whole world shuts down, right? When you're kind of ready to have like this insane year.
Yeah, that was a really challenging process for me. So 2019, I'm racing the rainbow jersey. I'm the world champion. And I was able to back that up. I had breakout results at the World Cups. I won the World Cup overall, which is kind of the average of all the World Cup series. And I did automatically qualify for Tokyo in 2020. And as you probably know, in America, when you pre-qualify for the Olympics, like it becomes a big media story, and you get a lot of opportunities as a result of that. So it was kind of the fall of 2019 into 2020. I'm doing the media, I'm doing the Team USA kind of appearances, doing commercials, getting ready for this Olympic Games. And I think at the time, I was really excited about the opportunity to finally compete and to compete with a chance of medaling. And that story was repeated over and over in the press, right? Okay, she's from where mountain biking began, and now, we're going to go win Tokyo.
It's a very tidy narrative.
And I felt that pressure really mounting. But I think when kind of March came around, I was finally starting to race. And I was like, okay, now I just get to do the thing. And then all the racing got canceled. Yeah. And they moved things in like 6-week increments for us. So they'd cancel a race, move it 6 weeks, cancel a race, move it 6 weeks. And so we just kept training and kind of staying prepared. Obviously, then they moved the Olympics. And I think that year for me was really stressful because I was trying to like hold on to this narrative and hold on to what was the best shape of my life really going into that year. And this kind of like 4-year plan was working. Mm-hmm. And then it became a 5-year plan. And that kicked off what ended up being a really, really challenging couple of years in my career.
Had they not done that kind of 6-week thing and just said, listen, the whole year's off, like you could have taken a breath, regrouped, and figured out how to strategize to make yourself as ready as you could for the following year. But that kind of thing of like, it's about to always happen, like is not only anxiety producing and stressful, but informing your training decisions, which are like, how do I stay on this razor's edge, and continue to kind of do that moving forward, which isn't in the interest of any athlete.
Yeah. I think it's hard for everyone. And I want to acknowledge that, having your athletic goals put on hold is not the most challenging outcome of the pandemic. And people were dealing with things that were much more stressful and life-altering than that. But I do think the mindset was challenging for everyone because in hindsight, of course, I should have taken the year off. I should have learned a language, like taken some writing classes. I don't know, done something else. But in those moments, it's really a skill to be able to shift and to be able to accept reality as it's unfolding and make a different decision. And I don't think I had the capacity to do that at that time. I think it really felt like I had to do this thing. And I was not able to let go of the pressure and stress that I was putting on that one goal that now was a year away.
How much of that stress was driven by intrinsic motivation and expectations versus like the extrinsic kind of like being in the media spotlight aspect of the whole thing?
It's such a good question. And I don't know if I can give a really clear answer to it, but I think it was some of both. Goals as an athlete, they do initially come from you. Like I was the one who wanted to target that race and to really see what was possible. But I think being at your best as an athlete involves an element of curiosity. I wonder what I might be capable of. And curiosity involves a level of uncertainty. There's a multitude of outcomes, some of which may be better than what I expect, some of which may be really disappointing. I accept that full range. And we're going to do this thing and give everything to it and be curious about the outcome. And I think sometimes that kind of crystallization of the storyline of what you're supposed to do takes away the curiosity and takes away the fun. And then ultimately it takes away your ability to go all in and perform, because the band of outcomes that is acceptable, and whether that's acceptable to me or to the media or to my team or whoever, becomes so narrow that you can no longer really engage with the activity.
And the risk of overly self-identifying with them, like, who am I if I'm not standing on this podium or winning this medal?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a trap that is really easy to fall into as an athlete, where you just, it feels really good to associate your identity with your sport when you're winning. Yeah. Right? You're like, you know what? Maybe this is who I am.
No problems here.
This looks great.
I'm the person who wins.
The gift of coming up short is having clarity in that separation. And that's, I would say, really been at the crux of what I've been sorting through since that Olympic experience. Spoiler alert, it did not go well.
Right.
I think everyone can imagine.
I want to unpack the Tokyo experience, but I think before that, like I also want to kind of better understand this cloistered subculture of mountain bike racing.
Of course.
As an American, like I have a lens on it, but I also know that it's very different in Europe, right? And that's really kind of where it blossoms in a way that we don't really experience here in the States.
Yeah, it's a much bigger deal in many European countries. It's the national sport in Switzerland. And
which is where I met you for the first time.
Which is where we met for the first time.
You were training there at the time.
Yeah, near Lake Zurich. So yeah, it just, because of that focus and the focus in investment and development, they've produced a lot of really, really talented racers. And I think also geography plays a big role, because it's a lot easier to drive from one European country to another and, go to an Austrian Cup one weekend and then a Swiss Cup and then an Italian Cup. Whereas for an American to get to those races, it's a 10-hour flight and spending a lot of time away from home. So because of that, I think there was a lot of kind of inter-country competition in Europe that brought the level up in a way that wasn't necessarily happening in the US at the time. Although I will say now we are seeing a huge resurgence of US athletes being super, super competitive.
And how does the whole point system work? Like there's a World Cup series, right? And a bunch of races, and you get points as you go along. And then there's sort of like a who won the World Cup and then a World Championships. How important is that in the context of like the Olympics? Like, is it more important to go to the Olympics? Is it more important to like distinguish yourself in this World Cup series? Like, how do you think about that?
Very good question. I'll give a brief mountain biking 101. Cross-country mountain biking, the races are about an hour and a half in length. So it's kind of the length of a half marathon. But I say the effort is more like sprinting a marathon. So you have a lot of anaerobic short climbs. There's technical descending. There's single track. There's some jumps. There's some rocks. And you do about 5 laps of a 4 or 5K course. And that's, a mass start event. First person across the finish line wins. So we have 9 or 10 World Cups a year of that race. And there's a series overall, but there's also the individual events matter quite a lot. And there's kind of the World Cup overall champion is the person who accumulates the most points in that series. Mm-hmm. I would say they focus a bit more like the one-day event of cycling. And this goes across mountain biking, across road, cyclocross, all the different disciplines. Have a one-day world championship. And if you win that world championship, you win the rainbow jersey, which is kind of, I'd say next to the yellow jersey is the most visible and kind of celebrated jersey in the sport of cycling.
And then you get to wear that for the next year.
And you get to wear it for the next year, which is pretty fun. And you get to wear stripes forever. So you have stripes on your jersey for the rest of your career. So that is like the every year competition. That will be my focus this year. The World Cup races, targeting, a few of them in particular, and then the World Championships. And then every 4 years we have the Olympics. And in mountain biking, what's really interesting is that the Olympics is a very, very small field. We only have about 30 athletes in the Olympics race. And there's, 80 to 150 in a normal World Cup. So what ends up happening is because the selection criteria are so tight, winning the Olympics is likely harder than any kind of World Cup or World Championship event, just because it comes every 4 years, everybody's focusing on it. We know what it takes to kind of get it to all line up on that day. But the depth of the field is quite different. So it's probably easier to get a top 10 in the Olympics than in kind of any World Cup. So it's this interesting dynamic with the sport where all of it can matter a lot. But there's definitely a different media focus on different events. Mm-hmm.
So much emphasis on the Olympics. And, my frame is always swimming or track and field. In those sports, the variables are very limited. You have your lane. No one's going to jump into your lane and get into your way or anything like that, right? You can kind of anticipate what you're going to face. Mountain biking is different. The course is very dynamic and, you guys are bumping into each other and there's all kinds of strategizing going on. So so many things can happen, only so much of which you can kind of prepare yourself for. That being said, going into Tokyo, my sense was that you were raring to go, everything was lining up and this was going to be your day. So is that true? And explain kind of what unfolded.
Yeah, I think my training that year was a little bit different. We were really trying to target that race and do the anaerobic work that was kind of called for by the Tokyo course. And things went well, but not perfectly all spring. And I think that alone would have been fine. I broke my arm at the second World Cup and kind of had to take a period to recover from that. And I think just at every juncture, I doubled down. And so that mindset, by the time I got to the actual race, I think my stress levels were so high that I really felt like I need this to go well. And of course, in bike racing, you just mentioned, things actually rarely go perfectly. Even in your best races, there's a fumble or a weird pass or a moment that you had doubt or didn't feel great, and then it comes together. And I don't think that I had the ability to tolerate that range of experience in that race. And I ended up having, a mistake and clipping out early in the race and started near the back. And that alone should be fine in a race, but really, really challenged me in that event. And I was not able to put together the performance that I believe I was capable of at that time.
So you ended up 15th,
I think 15th
in that race? Yeah. It's interesting. It's that tension between, the amount of like grit and dedication that you have to demonstrate, in order to get there in the first place. But if, the answer to every question and setback is like more grit, more suffering, and, and holding on even tighter than you were before, at some point that starts to go at cross purposes with the ultimate goal. Like when you're holding on so hard, you don't have like the emotional resilience to deal with those kind of variables that don't go your way, and you're unable to kind of like roll with what's actually happening in reality to perform at your best.
Yeah, I heard someone say once that high performance is like holding sand, where if you hold it too tight, the sand slips through your fingers. If you hold it too loose, the sand slips through your fingers. And it's really just having that like right amount of tension to be able to both take things very seriously and be completely invested, and also have that little bit of a relaxed, loose, accepting, flexible, adaptable mentality. And I think that's really the task in elite sport, is like finding that set point and understanding what it takes to get there for you as an athlete, mentally and physically.
Which is going to look different for every single different person.
That's the fun part.
Yeah. How did you kind of emotionally, manage that setback from Tokyo?
Yeah, I think, it's easy now to kind of like chunk these periods of my career together. I think there was kind of a year of just dealing with kind of the emotional fallout of that, trying to like get back to having fun on my bike. I remember I got a blood test after Tokyo and my cortisol was like 55. It's like 5 times what's normal for me. And really that became the first task, is like get back to a baseline for me and start to sort through some of these maybe less helpful mental patterns that developed during this period where I was so attached to this outcome that I didn't end up getting. And that was actually a really valuable process for me. I think it forces you to create a bit more of that separation of self and craft. And that was really important to have at that time. So focusing a bit more on like life outside of biking and family, my husband, my friends and community, riding my bike because I loved it. Those things really brought me back to that baseline. And then I think after a period of kind of 2 years or a year and a half, I really started to feel the itch to get back to that level of competitiveness. I think I worked through that emotional piece and got myself to a level where I could like accept the outcome and be in the race. But it almost like dulled my racing a bit. Like I was performing I've been 9th through 15th in almost every World Cup for the last 4 years, right? Where you're racing really well. It's actually very hard to get to that position, but it's very different than competing to win. And I think that requires even another level of evolution for me, and bringing back that competitive edge and that fire and desire to really like be competing at the top. Every
elite athlete endures a career of ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys and things like that. And success in a longevity context is always very much a function of that athlete's ability to kind of put everything in its proper context and have perspective over that, and to like understand that those ebbing periods or those, dips in performance are all learning experiences that can kind of inform, performance going forward. But that's got to be very difficult when you had this kind of like, couple years where you were just like killing it, and then things aren't working out for a period of time. And you could tell yourself, well, I'm in a rebuilding phase, or I'm like exploring other aspects of my life. But I would imagine, you're kind of like always thinking about like, how am I going to get back to like that place where I was, and, not just live in the shadow of like past performances. I mean, were there moments where you're like, okay, I could keep getting 9ths and 10ths and things like that, but is that really what I want to do with my life? Like, is this really the path for me? Like, were there moments where you thought like maybe it's time to hang it up? Or like, how did you find that fire to stay in it. And then also on top of that, the fire to be like, okay, like now I really want to be focused on performing at my absolute best.
Completely. It's really challenging in a sport where you kind of put a little bit in and you got a lot out. And then you're putting a lot in and you're not quite getting the returns that you're looking for. And I did have that moment. I think for me, at its best, sport makes me a better, more complete, more joyful, hardworking version of myself. Like, it makes me better for every other aspect of my life. It makes me a better partner, makes me a better community member. It is really elevating to all these other things. And that's when things are working really, really well.
Did you always have that awareness, or did you earn that awareness over time?
I think I earned that awareness over time. That one of the things I love about my sport is that when I'm kind of lit up in this way that I get when I'm pursuing this thing that I love, it translates to being more lit up and alive in life as a whole. And that wasn't really happening for this period of time. It felt like it was almost draining me of that excitement and life's force. Like, I'm just like trying to hold on long enough to get back on the podium, right? That was the goal. I'm like, okay, this will be fixed with a result, obviously, which never works. But I think, in that period, I will tell you a story. I had a race, the World Championships, and it was the first qualifier for Paris. And it was a top 3. And I said, okay, I've been in this kind of medium period. Like, what if I just go all in and try to get top 3 at this race? And like, this is the beginning of like being able to peak for events and really perform. And I had a 6-week training block, and everything pretty much went perfectly. Like, I never got sick. I never had an issue. I did every workout as it was prescribed. I hit every number, got good sleep every night. And I got into the race and I was not competitive at that level. And I remember like riding around the course, drafting my retirement letter in my head, thinking, okay, like if this is it, this is it. And I can do something else if that's what I want to do. And I remember I had just read Abby Wambach's book, Forward, and she talks about this kind of retirement juncture. And she had a line in there that's really stuck with me, which was when she was going through retirement, she had the realization that soccer never made me who I was. Like, I brought who I am to soccer. And that really, really like permeated my thinking at that time. I was like, okay, mountain biking doesn't make me who I am. I'm bringing who I am to mountain biking. And if it's not serving my life as a whole, maybe it's time to think about like opening the aperture on what's possible in my life. And my husband was there. We were in Glasgow and we had a day planned, which I'll be honest with you was a celebratory plan, right? We're like, oh, we'll go to Edinburgh and we'll spend the day celebrating after Worlds. And we spent like 10 hours walking the streets of this beautiful old town and talking about what I wanted from this chapter of my life and career, and what that looks like for me, but also for us as a team and as a partnership. And we still talk about that moment a lot because it was like complete vulnerability, openness on the table. Like, what are the options? Like, what is exciting? And he gave me the advice that in life, you can never just move away from something. You always have to move towards something new, towards something that's exciting. You don't just move away from something that didn't work or didn't feel good. You need to have something in its place. And so we kind of talked through it and I said, I still feel deeply that I have more to give in this sport. And what would make it worth giving that? And so we said, okay, coach, team, career, one's changing, leaving this conversation. And we didn't make a decision on what, but I kind of had this like 2-day reflective period. And through a series of what I can only call synchronicity, I ended up connecting with a coach who had worked with Pauline Ferrand-Prévot when she was around my age, and she was 28, and she'd been struggling, and she won all 3 road, gravel, and mountain bike world titles in 1 year. Wow. And I think had a similar period of struggle after that. She had some injuries and some challenges. And I think a lot of people told her to retire. And this coach ended up working with her and solving some of those problems with her. And she targeted her home Olympics in Paris, and she won by 3 minutes. So it worked out for her.
Yeah.
But I wasn't as interested in that like result story. I was more interested in the way that this coach approached the whole athlete and like supporting an athlete holistically to like find their best in the racing and also in the training, and like be able to bring that kind of personality and individuality back into the sport. And so I drove up to altitude camp and made the decision in one day to switch coaches right then and started working with this new coach. And that's been a really amazing journey.
So on that tip of like a holistic approach to training in life, like what were the specific changes that he implemented that were meaningful?
I think sometimes we just need a change. Like, I think it's easy to say, oh, this worked with this coach and this didn't work, and get really into specifics. But sometimes you just get stuck in a pattern or a rut, or the stimulus that you've had is no longer getting the response that it used to. And so I think just having that change was really refreshing. But I also think, having someone see where I was fully and really deeply believe what I believed, that I have more to give, and he's going to be a thought partner and a partner in revealing that and getting me to a place where I could give that physically and mentally was really exciting to me. And I think that's what I come back to when I think of that Edinburgh like walk in the darkness. Was this felt like a light to move towards. This felt like, okay, this is exciting. This is worth trying. And I went to altitude camp and I called him up. Okay, coach, his name's Barry Austin. I said, Barry, what's my training for the next few days? And he said, you've been so focused on doing that you've forgotten how to be. I just want you to be up at altitude and ride your bike for 3 days, and then we'll make a plan. And that alone, like, it was an indicator that I'd found someone who recognized my strengths, but who also could bring a different perspective and kind of get me out of this echo chamber of high performance where everything got narrower and narrower and narrower. And I was trying to control to get an outcome. And this was widening that aperture.
And also probably confronting for somebody who's such a data geek, right? Like, what do you mean be? Like, how's that going to show up on my garden?
I'm like, could you tell me what watts I need to be at?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard you talk about the difference between maximizing and optimizing, which I'm curious about. But this chapter feels like, okay, it's this journey from like optimizing to maximizing to expanding.
Yeah, it really was. And I think one of the things that I really appreciated about the training early on was that it was very different and that it really involved mindset. And I think when I'm super attached to numbers, you talk about the maximizing versus optimizing, my goal became to just get the numbers higher and higher, because that's what worked when I was young, right? When you're really young and you start out, you like reach the next level of data and then you reach the next level of performance, right? You're building the engine and you're kind of notching the numbers up every year.
And you have no reason to believe that that's ever going to stop.
Yes, which it always does, of course. And there's definitely, within different energy systems, there's a range where you kind of get to that optimal. And it's not necessarily useful to spend all your time getting your 2-minute power up and getting 4 watts for all this energy, right? So it's maybe getting a little technical, but you can over-index on some of those things. And my coach both moved me away from numbers in some areas, but he also gave me these workouts that were open-ended. So it was like, do it until you can't anymore. And I'd call him, okay, but like, what number do you think I can do? No numbers. How many do you think I should be able to do? No answer. And I had to go just figure it out. And I think that challenge was exactly what I needed to get back to actually how I felt as a young athlete, where you are just pushing your edge and you're wondering, can I do one more? And only you can answer that question. And that was a huge part of that early period with this new coach. Was actually my numbers did improve when I was able to just really focus on that effort and start to shed that kind of expectation piece of it should be this number. If it's not, I'm behind and I won't perform well. It became, I wonder if I can do one more. And then I'd get a lot of positive feedback. And it started this new cycle and this new loop of kind of getting back to what I think is really the best high performance mindset for me.
We're brought to you today by Bond Charge. Now, it's fair to say that I've subjected my skin to a lifetime of harsh treatment, thousands of hours in overly chlorinated indoor pools, and pretty much almost no concern for skincare. And I would say it wasn't until I was about in my mid-50s that I started doing what I should have done all along, which is taking care of my body's largest organ. This shift led me to the incredible product line from Bond Charge, most notably their red light face mask. Their red and near infrared light is designed to rejuvenate your skin at a cellular level. It's completely non-invasive. Just 10 minutes is all it requires a day. The design is incredibly thoughtful. There's no cord, it's comfortable, and it's slim enough for easy travel. There's just nothing elaborate about it. Just science-backed wellness made accessible at home. So check it out. Go to bondcharge.com/richroll and use coupon code RICHROLL to save 15%. Meet Bragg, the original architects of whole food wellness. Their organic apple cider vinegar is a perfect example of thoughtful, clean nutrition. It's non-GMO, USDA organic, produced in the USA with absolutely no additives or processed sugars. It's kind of like this perfect and versatile and super healthy addition to salad dressings and a wide variety of recipes for this tangy, nutritious boost. From the very beginnings of my personal adventures in nutrition and well-being 18 years ago, Bragg, I got to tell you, was the first brand I turned to. I actually talk about this in my book, Finding Ultra, which came out 13 years ago. And it's a brand that I've remained unwaveringly loyal to because their products are best in class, because of their insane commitment to quality, and not for nothing, because Bragg is a brand that's been doing things right for over 100 years. So check it out. Use promo code RICHROLL for 20% off your first order at bragg.com. Visit bragg.com to get your daily dose of wellness. So it's this emergence or this liberation from the data and the numbers, being something that served you to then being something that you served that, began to limit you. And like by just, kind of focusing on the mindset piece or just feel, right? Like that's the way out of like, holding on to those numbers too tight as a predictor of, kind of over extrapolating on those data sets as a predictor of outcomes.
Absolutely. And it's a hard process to do that, like connecting with that feeling and that qualitative aspect of racing really well.
But that's racing. And that's like the superpower of every athlete, like that connectivity with yourself, like knowing how to read into that and, kind of lean into it as opposed to, being so focused on the computer.
Absolutely. And what we ended up figuring out, so I did this off season of training with this coach and I got a lot stronger. And I thought, okay, maybe that's the answer. Maybe I just needed a little more power. And I go to the first race and I actually was competing against another athlete that he coaches. Her name's Candace Lill. She's a good friend. She was my partner at the stage race earlier this year. And I got dropped on this climb. And he looks at the data later and was like, this is super weird. You were doing more power than the other athlete. And we kind of have an understanding with this coach, like he never shares data of other athletes with you, but we all try to kind of help each other improve, which is a really interesting environment that he's created among a few of these professional women. But he noticed this discrepancy and he got video footage from the side of me riding. And we discovered I basically had this big gap in my pedal stroke where I was fighting so hard to produce power and so disconnected
just
from
for
what
the
it felt
purpose
like.
of the numbers. Yeah.
100%.
Not actually moving yourself forward.
Truly.
Yeah.
So I had developed in this period where I was just kind of strangling the power meter to try to get a result. I developed a bit of a gap in my pedal stroke and this inefficiency for how much power I was doing. I should have been going a lot faster. And that was at the beginning of last year. And it kind of kicked off what has now been a qualitative journey. This is why I mentioned it, of we've had to retrain the way that I actually pedal a bike. We had to kind of do a bunch of testing to figure out how to do that and what that might look like and how we measured it. But then also spend so much time on my bike, not focused on numbers, but focused on executing this form and having the specific feeling on the bike where I could start to get that efficiency back.
Because feel and mindset go hand in hand. And, when you become so attached to the numbers in a race context, that can harm you more than help you. Like if you're looking at your watts and you're like, well, I can't go over this threshold because I'm going to blow up. So no matter what's happening in the race, like I'm going to keep it right here. You're not feeling your own body, right? And if you got rid of that and just went on feel, you have no idea what the numbers are, and you can uncork like some, crazy performance that you didn't know that you were capable of. I had Alex Hutchinson in here the other day, who wrote this great book, Endure. I don't know if you read this book, but he's got a new book coming out. Anyway, he tells this great story when he was in high school, or maybe it was college. His goal was to break 4 minutes for the 1500 meters. He'd never done it. And he thought if he could just do that, that would put him in a new kind of category. And he was in some stupid dual meet, like a meaningless meet. And the first lap, his split was some crazy split that was so much faster than he ever thought that he would ever go. And he's like, wow, well, either I'm going to explode, but I feel good, so I'm going to keep going. And he ended up going way below 4 minutes in this just random nothing meet. And then he found out later that the split that the guy gave him for the first, for the first lap was way off. It wasn't correct or whatever. But it goes to the mindset piece and the idea of feel, right? And I think as much as we've learned and how much that's impacted the betterment of training through, watts and lactate buffering and nutrition, all of these things are good, right? But when we hold on to it's back to the hold on too tight, right? I think the real horizon in terms of growth and human performance is right here, right? In between our temples.
Completely. And that becomes a big mindset journey to try to understand these things. I think it's something I've learned about myself is that I am prone to binary thinking. It's it's all amazing or it's terrible, right? It's you use data and that's all you use, or you don't. It matters or it doesn't. And the truth is always somewhere in between.
But that gets to the metaphor of the holding the sand, right? It's a Zen koan, the whole thing.
And I'll say, for example, we would not have discovered this missing piece in my performance. And there are other missing pieces. That's not the silver bullet, but it's certainly a big focus of where I can gain efficiency. But we wouldn't have discovered that without power numbers, right? The data helped reveal the missing links, but it was not necessarily the solution to those missing links. Sure, but the whole
reason you had that inefficiency in your pedal stroke is because you were so locked into the numbers.
Yeah, so it's this really interesting relationship where I think we focus a lot on the 1%, and that's become the marginal gains mindset has become huge. And there are studies and research and real backing behind a lot of these 1% things. But I do think so many people ignore the 99%. If you just feel good, you're relaxed, you sleep well, you have good relationships with the people in your life, and you're enjoying doing your sport, like that takes you a long way, right? Like there's these big factors. And I think mindset is one of those things where if focusing on the 1% robs you of the ability to bring the right competitive mindset to the sport, the 1% won't help you, right? You'll develop a pedaling inefficiency and be on the treadmill of frustration, right? Like it's the ability to kind of hold these things in balance and right size the importance of the different aspects of performance.
It's such an important point. I'd never heard it. I didn't know that it had a name. Like, what did you call it? The marginal gains theory or approach to training. Those marginal gains, though, are like so sexy and fun. They're cold plunges and they're like, special, expensive, sort of supplements that you put in your smoothie, or they're like, sleep hacks and all these. That's where all the discourse is, because it's just not that interesting to talk about like how you need to kind of just go out and ride your bike all day, not worry about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a social media thing too, I think, that influences that.
It's like
like if you string together all of these like little cherries on top, that will like obviate all the other stuff that you actually need to do.
Yeah. And I think there's also been a focus on this kind of sacrifice, discipline, like Navy SEAL version of high performance in the discourse and on social media. And there's an element of that. Like you do have to be disciplined. You do have to show up and do your job and get it done. But if you do that to the expense of joy, if you do that at the expense of curiosity, you lose this softer side of performance, the mindfulness, the focus, attention, goal setting, like all of these mental skills that at the end of the day probably play a bigger role in differentiating at the very, very tip of the spear.
How did you learn that lesson?
I don't know that I like learned it in one moment, but I do think a focus on meditation and mindfulness has helped me in that area. And again, that's somewhere where I've had to find like the right place for that in my life and in my performance. But I've always been really drawn to working with the mind and observing your thoughts and being in the present. And I've connected with a few great teachers around that. I took some classes at Stanford. And
I know you were like kind of teaching it at Stanford. This isn't like a new thing.
Yeah. And then I connected with a great meditation coach, Patrick Sweeney, during that actually challenging period after the Olympics. And a lot of the focus was on flow state and reading a lot of texts about flow state and how that's been applied to sports in the past. And that really opened my eyes to, again, right sizing that element of discipline and focus and pushing the numbers with this kind of soft skill aspect of sport, and understanding that like both are an element of being at my very best.
How does that play into confronting fears and managing setbacks and obstacles?
I think it gives you a tool set that you can use to manage those challenges. For me, though, it's less about like meditating my way out of a challenge. It's more about understanding that I can build the mental skills to learn from a situation. And that goes back to like the big growth mindset focus. And Carol Dweck has done a lot of amazing research in this field. And it's something that I come back to often and has actually really informed the way I'm thinking about this phase of my career. But ultimately, when we talk about the challenges I was dealing with around that kind of Olympics and expectation and pressure, I really shifted from this growth mindset of, challenges will make me better. Opportunities are opportunities to succeed. I can learn, I can improve, to this more fixed mindset of I have to be perfect and I have to get this outcome and I need to control this process. And I think that is really what taught me. Like that not working was a beautiful lesson for me.
Right. I mean, you have to, kind of crash into the wall before you're willing to let go of that being the operating system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because somebody can tell you like, yeah, that's not really going to work out. But like, if it's working out, like you're not going to stop doing it.
A lot of these lessons have to be learned the hard way, I think.
I don't know why that is, but it definitely is the case. You mentioned earlier in this sort of, dark night of the soul, and you're walking around Glasgow or Edinburgh, this epiphany or this realization that you had, more to give to the sport. And I think you could define that narrowly to mean that like I have wins in me that are yet to be unlocked. But I think there's a broader definition that is slowly kind of like unfolding in all of this that gets to like a bigger why. Like the why can't just be like, I want to win an Olympic gold medal. It has to be something more than that.
Winning alone doesn't really carry value. It doesn't carry the subjective value in the context of your life. It's subjective. Like mountain biking is this very small microcosm of the world that most people who are listening to this podcast probably don't spend a lot of their time thinking about. I spend all my time thinking about it.
Yeah.
And it's because I love it and I care about it. And that's where the meaning comes from. And I feel that I had this realization that it's not just achieving the goal in this next chapter of my career, it's the way that I'm going about it. And I want to be able to fully express myself in every aspect of what I'm doing in pursuit of something. And to acknowledge that that's kind of the point, is to be all in, is to take the risk, make the gamble, because you love something and you want to see what might be possible.
Mm-hmm. In this evolution that you're in right now, though, there's also a service piece, like a giving back piece. I guess that's what I'm getting at in terms of like the why. It's sort of like, yes, and like a way to really kind of root yourself in this mission-based perspective, way of like pursuing excellence in your sport.
I found in this last period that one of the things that was most gratifying to me was connecting with young female riders. When I started in this sport, and I think a huge part of my desire to get on the top of the podium in that early phase of my career was that I didn't see a lot of other American women my age doing that. The next kind of role model for me, Leah Davison, was 10 years older, and she was on podiums and she inspired me to want to do that. But there wasn't that clear link and there wasn't that clear path. And I think honestly, Americans were underestimated. And so that was part of wanting to like get on that podium. And what made that meaningful was seeing not just what that win, but what this sport can do for other women and for aspiring, not just racers, but riders. And so I was kind of having this experience where I'd go to the races and I'd be 10th and I'd kind of be disappointed and it wouldn't be that much fun. And then I'd go home and I'd ride with these girls and they would be lit up being on their bikes and they would, be overcoming challenges, trying a new rock garden, doing a bigger hill and just like talking about life. And it felt so silly to see the disconnect of like how I was feeling on my bike and like what you're meant to feel in like striving to be better in this thing that's really fun. And that disconnect started to really bother me, that like they didn't care whether I was 10th or 15th or I was 5th. They're like, great, that's cool. Hey, how do you do this? Like, how do you go over a rock?
How refreshing though.
It was refreshing. And so I ended up starting a foundation in 2023, the She Sends Foundation. And we primarily support grassroots organizations that get more girls on bikes and hopefully create a bit more community around getting more women on bikes and making the sport more accessible and inviting for women everywhere. So that's been a really gratifying project to work on. And I think it fills this bigger meaning for me. It's not just about getting more people on bikes. It's about inspiring women in particular to like send it and take risks and go after things. And the bike just happens to be a really beautiful vehicle to not just communicate those lessons, but to like experience them and learn them and feel them for yourself.
So for the non-cyclist people out there, when you say send it or she sends, like what does that mean? What does that mean?
Send it is a term. It's common in mountain biking and in rock climbing and skiing. And it basically refers to that kind of go for it moment. I always think about, it's if I'm on a course and I go and there's a jump and I look at the jump and I think, okay, I think I can do it. And I go back up to the top of the hill and you're sitting there thinking, okay, I have to let go of the brakes. Like the moment that you let go of the brakes and you go and you begin to pick up speed and you commit to doing this thing that's scary and hard, but you think you can do, that is sending it.
As you get older, is that relationship with fear, has that like changed at all? Because like you have to be so fearless. Like when you're bombing down these trails and there's roots and rocks and like, I mean, like you could, like people like they die, they have, head injury, like all kinds of crazy shit can happen.
Yeah.
And kind of as you get older, you're like, maybe a little bit of breaks here, it gets harder to like fully send it, doesn't it? Or are you able to like just fully send it every time?
I think you get more skill and then the skill helps you to mitigate the risk. So for me, having really good skills coaches and being able to understand where my limits are actually takes out a lot of that feeling on my bike. But I think the bigger challenge for me was sending it in my career overall. So having this desire to keep racing and this desire to see what's possible and to give everything I have, not just on the race course, but also back to my community, back to the sport and changing the opportunities that women will have in the future in the sport. That is more of an emotional risk than a physical risk. And that is what I think with age, I end up focusing more on.
It's like a meta thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to send it on the bike, but like, how are you, Kate, like actually sending it like at the highest level? And that requires like getting really honest with yourself about like, what is this career that I'm in? Like, why is it, have to operate within this kind of like strict paradigm? What would a different version of being a professional athlete in this sport look like? And like imagining, what doesn't exist yet and like sending it in order to create a scenario that suits your life and your goals and your why, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Like it's ambitious, this thing that you've done, because not only did you create this foundation, you've reimagined like, how somebody in your position could pursue their career as a professional. So I'm kind of inching you up towards like telling me about this newest chapter in forming. I mean, it's a team of one right now, but I imagine like you are seeing this will grow into more than just you at some point. But somebody who's been a professional athlete for 10 years and done it kind of in the traditional way, you have sponsors and you're on a team, et cetera. You're kind of treading uncharted territory now.
Yeah. So this year I will be racing with that foundation as the title of my team. So She Sends Racing. And I'll be wearing a jersey to start the year that has that foundation front and center. And then we'll have the logos of partners that are personally supporting me. And that's a big jump in my discipline. I think it's more common in triathlon, and actually being friends with Chelsea Sodaro has helped me understand like how you can make a more privateer program work. But I think applying that to the World Cup circuit is just logistically difficult and has some inherent challenges. And also, not to mention the kind of like mental challenge of being the captain of your own ship and having to make these decisions and ultimately being accountable for the things that go well and the things that don't go well. So that's been a big kind of more entrepreneurial journey for me this year that has added a lot of layers to my everyday life outside of the training and racing.
So basically in your sport, every athlete is a member of a team in order to compete on this World Cup circuit. Mm-hmm. Is that right? And so for you to say like, I have been on a team for a very long time. I'm no longer going to be on any of these teams, and I'm going to create my own team, and that team is me.
right? Is that
yes?
I'm trying to understand like why this is such a departure.
Yeah. So the rules have changed slightly in the last year, and I think it opened up this window of opportunity. Essentially, before, to compete in a World Cup, typically you've been on what we call a factory team. So usually sponsored primarily by a bike brand, and that's kind of your main sponsor. And they provide not only like your salary, but they provide your support. So your bikes, your support at races, and you kind of operate as a team. The rule change was that if you are in the top 100 of world rankings, you can enter any World Cup kind of independently through your federation. And so that opened up this opportunity to not necessarily race under the umbrella of a team, but to race for my own team. And it's kind of the difference between having a job at a company and kind of starting a company, right? It's that kind of transition. And I do think it will be kind of more popular in the coming years. I think it's something that suits a certain type of athlete. And I think I've had to learn a lot about myself and about what environment works for me and about what I need to both chase my high performance goals at the top level, but also to feel this purpose and connection and meaning really, really tied to everything I do. And this structure has really allowed me to do that.
You live in Silicon Valley. Your husband is an entrepreneur. You literally live like in the area where Steve Jobs used to live. So this is thinking different, right? It's sort of it's in the air, it's in the ethos of, this place that you call home. So it's not surprising that you're like bringing a kind of, first principles thinking to this rule change and figuring out how you could do something different in that. And I think it's exciting. I would imagine with that rule change, most athletes would be like, yep, well, I can, enter as an individual, but like, why would I not be part of one of these factory teams? There's safety in that. I have support, et cetera. And for you to say, well, I'll create my own support system with the partners that I want to work with.
Yeah. And I think I resisted the idea for a while. The seed was kind of planted.
I would imagine It probably has ended up being a lot more work than you thought it was going to be.
Oh, completely. Yeah. And I think I actually knew that it would be that way. So I really resisted it for a while. And I just couldn't shake the idea. And the idea was about more than just, having different logos on my jersey or riding a different bike or, getting to hire my own mechanic. Like it was about testing this hypothesis that I will be a better athlete if I bring my full multidimensional self to this sport. And that I think for me, the idea of building something that was really mission driven, where at its core, the values that I want to bring to the sport are at the heart of everything we do. That was a really compelling idea for me. And when I started to kind of explore it, I started to connect with brands and companies and people that really shared that mission and that really shared those values. And once I started to have those conversations, it was almost like I couldn't not do it.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, the UCI isn't exactly known for being open-minded. A lot of, there's the stories are legend, at least in road cycling, about kind of the traditionalism of this sport and their resistance to kind of evolution. And this is an evolution that you're presenting. Like, how is this being received by the UCI? Like, is there sort of a hey, not so fast, or is there hey, this is awesome, this is great. We can't wait to see what you're going to do with this?
I may have to answer that question after the first few World Cups, but I think so far it's been really supportive. And my goal is to bring more attention and more support to mountain biking as a whole. So hopefully we're kind of pulling on the same string there. And at
That's
a minimum,
sort of I dare you to poo-poo this when I'm trying to bring more people into the sport.
Yeah. And ultimately my goal was to create a race environment where I am given the best chance to produce my best performances, but to do so in service of this larger mission and this larger purpose of getting more girls on bikes and bringing more people into the sport and inspiring more people through what is possible in the sport. And that is at the core. Every single brand that I am partnered with signed on because they were excited about that mission. and is supporting it in some big fundamental way. And that just feels really different. And I think, when I thought about what I wanted this next chapter to feel like, one of the things I came back to was I want to feel good on the start line. I don't want to just feel good on the finish line, depending on how it goes. I want to feel good on the start line. And when I pull up to the first World Cup and I'm on a bike with a brand that I work super closely with, and it's a custom paint job that you can buy, and a portion goes to getting more girls on bikes. When I'm wearing a jersey where every brand on that jersey, I've spoken to the CEO of the company, and they share my values, and they have created companies and products that are trying to make the world better and serving their own missions that really align with mine. Like, that is something that I think will feel just as good as any win in my career.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can get specific about that. I mean, you mentioned kind of factory bikes. We all know the huge bike brands that are out there, and you're now working with a company called Allied. It's an independent, smaller bicycle company. Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
In Arkansas, that correct me if I'm wrong, is owned, or at least, there's a majority stake owned by Stu and Tom Walton of the Walmart family. And those guys, together are responsible for, so much in the cycling and mountain biking community alone, because of their enthusiasm for the sport and the money that they've, put into kind of evangelizing it and democratizing access to it.
Allied is a new brand that I'll be working with this year, and they're relatively young in the cycling world, but they make an incredible product, and it's one that I had the chance to ride before committing to work with the brand. And the bike was obviously, it's my tool. It's a huge part of how I made that decision. But I think what you mentioned about the larger ethos of the company and what the Waltons are helping to create in Bentonville is something I was really excited about, because ultimately they are getting more people on bikes, and they're getting more people out, and not just racers, but young kids, families. They're creating a lower barrier to access for the sport that I think can really change people's lives. And that's something really exciting to be a part of. And I think we will be able to grow together in the coming years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you recently announced this partnership with Rivian, which is super exciting, right? RJ's the best. We just had him on the podcast, and super into mountain bike riding.
Yeah, I have to credit RJ. I don't think I would be pursuing this new team structure without him. Very early on in the process, I started reaching out to people for help and advice, and I ended up connecting with him. And he was able to get on the phone with me, which was really a great opportunity. And I started to ask him, I understand what the value proposition is for a brand like Allied. I ride their bike. I'm an American racer who brings an American brand to the World Cup. You post photos of it. The deliverables are very clear. It's a more traditional relationship. But how could I add value to non-endemic companies like Rivian? And it's a slightly different proposition. And I wanted to understand, what would make a professional athlete valuable to your brand? And he made this distinction right away that a lot of companies in the more endemic space are marketing based on product. It's about the product being superior and the evolution of the bike and the evolution of the equipment. And that is super valuable. And as a racer, I know how to tell that story. Mm-hmm. But what a brand like Rivian is focused on is really aligning with people and events and things that communicate their values and this vision and kind of bigger brand ethos. And that is what connects to mountain biking. So Rivian wants to empower people's adventures. They want to get people out. They want to inspire people to do more and go more places. And that is the storyline that as an athlete, the deliverables look different. The relationship looks different. But that is where there's alignment and where these brand partnerships can not just be really fun and interesting and cool, and obviously it's a dream brand to work with and a dream car to drive, but where they have depth, because there's an alignment of vision and values that we can co-communicate.
Yeah. Spoken like an entrepreneur also, right? You know what I mean? It's so I'm listening to you and I'm like, this is all like exactly right. Like you understand like brand and storytelling and like narrative. Like when I think about Rivian, it's like you're the embodiment of this ethos that they're trying to kind of explain, you know, to the public. Like, this is what we're about. These are what our values are. This person sort of represents that. But the idea that in 2025, like, can you just be a professional athlete who goes out and does your thing? Or do you have to be like an expert in like marketing and brand relations? Like you kind of do, right? Like it is a different world where you have to think about these things and you have to care about them. And I loved the approach that you took with RJ, because it wasn't like, hey, I need a sponsor, I'm trying to create this thing. It's like, and it wasn't even like, here's what I can do for you. It was like, I don't even know if there is something I could do for you. Like your approach is like, how could I serve you? Like, before we even talk about this, like, is there a way for me to serve you? I'm not even sure I understand what that might be. Like, is a mindset shift of like service. Like, it's not about what you could get from some, multi-billion-dollar brand. It's you thinking about like, how would a relationship work in which I could provide value to them?
It's interesting because I actually hadn't even, obviously Rivian would always be a dream partner, but
of course, any athlete would love to be associated with a brand like that.
But that conversation happened in that phase where I was still exploring and trying to understand, would this work? Could I do this? How would I do this? What would this look like? And how could I create something that doesn't just, serve my athletic goals or raise money for my foundation? Of course, there's other ways to do that, but that would create something of value to all these different parties. And that's getting an economic structure right. That's getting these partnerships right, the marketing strategy right. And I didn't have enough information to really know where those limits were. And I truly called RJ for advice and a little bit of a litmus test of like, do you think this would maybe be worth thinking about? Mm-hmm. And in that conversation, he gave me that advice and told me that Rivian would be, exploring being one of the first partners. And that conversation alone, like, really shifted my view of, okay, I think there's something here that's worth pursuing. And when you say, can you not just be an athlete anymore? I actually think you can. I think there's many, many ways to structure your life and structure your career. And not every athlete is going to want to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of work. There are trade-offs. And for some athletes, this would be like the worst version of their athletic career. They're distracted and it's stressful. But for me, what we're talking about and what I felt on that call is like this curiosity, this excitement, this opening of possibility, this intellectual challenge of understanding how these pieces move together and how I could be a meaningful and valuable role within it. That is, I believe, part of what was missing in this narrowing of my athletic career, is that I need these pursuits and this excitement and this fuel outside of riding to be able to be my best on the bike.
Yeah. Well, also, I feel you kind of getting animated talking about this. So it's like you obviously like are like, this is interesting and exciting for you to like have these types of conversations. But I also think it's, on the subject of mindset shifts, like in the traditional paradigm of, athlete working with brand, it is a narrow kind of relationship in which, your monetization is tied to like, what races are you going to and what are you, and you have to get on these podiums. And when you're on the podium, you wear this piece of apparel or whatever it is. Whereas someone like Rivian, this represents like a broader perspective on, how an athlete can be an ambassador for a brand and create a career that still, you still have to perform, but it's not really about like whether you win or lose. It's about like, this message that you're carrying that other people care about. And I think most people who follow you on social media aren't doing it because of your specific race performances. It's because you have a certain energy and an enthusiasm for this sport and getting outdoors, and there's an inclusivity to the whole thing that makes people feel good and energized around their own relationship with, fitness and nature, et cetera. And that has, longevity beyond your professional racing career.
To me, that really gets at the value of sport in general, is to be able to communicate these experiences, these learnings, this journey that we're on as athletes, and make it useful to other people and use it to connect with other people. And I feel much closer to that now in this new structure where there's transparency. It's just me. It's really...
I didn't know that. When you first announced it, I'll admit, I was casually, I saw that, but I didn't get into the details of it. And I was like, oh, she started a team. So and then whenever you show these videos and images, you're always riding with a bunch of other people. So I just thought oh, that's so cool. She has a whole team now that, she's in charge of.
It's interesting. I call it a team, though it is just me racing, because it requires a team. Mountain biking is a team sport. I have a full-time mechanic. I have a coach. I have a strength coach. I have a mental coach. I have a physio, right? There's all of these people that are very, very skilled, some of the best in the world at what they do. And the skill that I bring is racing the bike. But the race is really the culmination of that whole body of work and the work of that entire team making it possible. And so for me, even though I will be the only athlete on the start line, it does feel like a team.
And you get to have all of those people yourself, though.
Well, some of them I share.
No, it's great because I'm just you watch the Tour de France, they have these huge buses, and you see the staff and the team and all of that, but they're serving 20, 30 guys.
I mean, there's going to be some scrappy moments. I think my mom is moonlighting to cook for a few races and come be an extra set of hands, but it will be a much more simplified setup. SRAM will be providing all my World Cup support. So I have some great brands helping make sure that I have what I need on the ground. But actually for me, I think having a more simplified performance environment helps me feel more calm and to be a bit more in control, and that helps me race better.
Sure. We mentioned earlier that we first met in Zurich, and the reason I was in Zurich was I was going to visit the On Labs headquarters for the first time, and that was kind of the beginning of my relationship with this extraordinary brand. But from what I hear, I think you are part of the On team now.
We're teammates now.
Yeah. At the moment of this recording, I don't think it's been.
I think it's in process, but I think we'll make sure it's done by then.
Which is pretty exciting.
It's really exciting. On is a dream brand to work with, and they really fit into this mission-driven kind of category of brands. I find when I think about it, there's a lot of ways to make a shoe or make a car or make a bike, and there's definitely easier routes than the way that they specifically are pursuing their high performance shoes and apparel. But the reason they're doing it that way is because of these values that underlie everything the brand stands for. It's this emphasis on performance. It's this real commitment to environmental sustainability. And it's this view of how we should be doing things that, again, is so in line with the way that I want to approach my racing career. It's not just the product you produce or the race you win. It's really what you bring to that process and how close you can stay to those core values as you are pursuing it.
And the community piece.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what the whole part of what the whole Soft Wins
the glue
campaign is now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I absolutely love working with them. I feel so privileged to be working with a company that is, really innovating. When I visited their headquarters, I don't know what I expected because I've never visited an apparel or a running shoe company headquarters before, but it felt like, I mean, there was so much energy, so much youthful energy, so much enthusiasm. And they're always like, like trying new things all the time. It felt like more like a technology company. I mean, I know they call it an innovation company, but it's like, that was the vibe more than like, oh, we make running shoes and gear. It was like, what if we reimagine this whole thing? What would that look like?
Yeah, it was a building you just wanted to spend time in because it had this energy that made you feel more was possible and made you want to try to do more and be more and discover more and experience more. And I think that's something that speaks to the brand as a whole, but also the people that were in that building.
Mm-hmm. And now, well, you also have Momentous. You've got and you work with Rafa also. Like you've got a lot. You have like a lot of like incredible brands that you're working with, and the idea that you're like thinking about them and how they all fit in, and how do we, how do all the values kind of like overlap to create this thing? It's not just about like LA 28 or this season's World Cup series. It's about how do I create something that is sustainable with lasting power, that is elastic, that can like grow. And with the foundation piece, like work to bring more people into the sport that I love. And I feel like that's a real like fuel source that will, power you to great heights, but also, kind of nourish you in the moments when maybe you didn't perform quite as well as you wish you had.
Absolutely. I think having that as a big focus helps free me up to just race because I love racing. Mm-hmm. And the structure you just talked about, it's interesting. We haven't talked much about social media, but obviously that's a big part of my job as an athlete. It's a big part of being kind of in the public eye these days and of working with brands. And I think through the course of that, we've kind of talked about my trajectory and the Olympic period, and in the last 10 years, like the rise of influencer marketing and kind of the way that we tell stories and work with brands and what the actual job of a professional athlete looks like has changed dramatically at all these different junctures. And at times it's felt really good. And at times it's felt really challenging for me to like find meaning in, is it about what you're posting? Is it just selling products? Am I just posting about race results? Like, where does this fit in, and how can this be constructive, and is it constructive at all? And I landed at one point with this perspective of there's primary work and secondary work. And social media is secondary work for me. It's how I document the primary work. So if the primary work is racing my bike, it's telling the story of racing my bike. And I think at its best, everything is like that, right? It's you write the book and then social media reflects that you wrote the book, but social media was not the end goal. And I feel really liberated in this period to create primary work with each of these brands. So it's not just, okay, post this thing. It's, could we do something interesting and fun and values aligned that furthers all of our goals, right? And that, helps make the world a little bit better. And then you can reflect that on social media, whether it's like leading a huge event and getting more girls on bikes, or whether it's creating a custom line of something that benefits the foundation, or even just being involved with an exciting product launch. Like those partnerships become this primary work, and there's depth to them in a way that makes it really fun and exciting. And I think people can feel that. They can feel the authenticity and the realness of those relationships, and that it's not just this kind of made for TV experience of telling a brand story.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really cool. And I guess I wonder, like with LA 28 on the horizon, like by the time that descends on this city, like where do you see she sends? Like, what does it look like at that point? Like, what is the evolution from where it is now at its, kind of inception to where you want it to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now?
It's a good question. And of course, as an athlete in an Olympic sport, the Olympics coming to LA is a huge target. It's a date on the calendar. But when I reflected on what would make that goal worth pursuing, I really thought about this 4-year period of my career and the kind of legacy piece that I wanted to leave. And I feel we've talked a lot about the Olympics. It's not all that I focus on, but it is a really beautiful way to kind of separate out these 4-year periods. And I think they affect us a lot as athletes in how we're preparing for things. And when I think about the goal in these next 4 years, I think about what I want it to feel like to be there and look back and see that journey generated a lot of value, not just for me as a person and having the opportunity to pursue my goal, but that it affected the sport. It impacted the opportunities for women in the sport. It brought more young girls into the sport and ultimately like inspired people to just go for it. And I think for me, the biggest, scariest goal is like starting my own team, setting this 4-year horizon where there's complete uncertainty. Like I am just starting to think, okay, I think I have enough money to like go to the races and everything's going to work out and it feels really good and I'm excited. But it was a huge uncertainty even in the last 6 months of whether I could put this team together. That's not to mention trying to race against the best in the world. So there's a fair amount of uncertainty in this. But if I go to these programs and if I ride with these young girls through She Sends and I tell them, if you have a dream, you got to go for it and you got to commit and take risk and you don't know what's possible, I have to be willing to live that.
Yeah.
And this 4-year journey, that's me living it. That's me going for it. And it's that old Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance quote of like, it's not the top of the mountain that sustains life, it's the sides. It's really the act of going all in that matters.
When you get on your bike to train these days, do you feel like a renewed vigor?
I definitely feel a renewed vigor. I think what's interesting for me is that I feel a renewed kind of focus and edge. And it reminds me a lot of the way that I felt when I was a full-time student. And I would, rush from this class and I'd jump on my bike and nothing would be perfect, right? I didn't have time to do 2 or 3 things. And I just got to get moving because I got a limited window. And the feeling of focus and like determination that comes from doing it anyway and just being all in on that moment is something that I think I almost need a little bit more chaos in my life to lock into that feeling. And I've definitely been feeling that more on my bike.
So what do you say to the person who's looking for something to go all in on, but doesn't quite know what that is?
It's a really good question. I think it's about listening to that curiosity and excitement. And I think you just follow it. You just follow the little breadcrumbs of that feeling and be willing to take a little risk when you need to find out what you're capable of.
It can't be manufactured and it can't be faked, right? But you also can't just wait to be struck with it. Like, I think those things are revealed through doing things. And to your point, like being willing to explore your curiosities. And I think the modern world has a way of like eroding our relationship with our own curiosity because we're told we need to do these things or this is what success looks like or the path that you should be on. And curiosities are an indulgence or something that we kind of like repress or quash rather than kind of move towards.
It feels like there's a lot of focus on what we get out of things right now, which is important. I mean, I would not be sitting here if the pendulum of luck hadn't kind of swung in the right direction at certain races in my career, right? So I'm not saying that accomplishments and what you get out of things doesn't matter at all. Like, I live in reality. But I find that a better compass is what you can give to things. And I'll tell you a little story, and this now I've related everything back to the Olympics, which, I guess these pivotal moments, they really make an impact and you learn from them. But I always thought, like from when I was a little kid, that if I went to the Olympics, I'd go get the Olympic tattoo, right? That's like the sexy focus thing. So I go, I don't have this great experience. I obviously do not get the tattoo.
you don't want to look at it and be reminded of.
Completely.
Yeah.
And then I don't make the Paris team, which we didn't really get to. But yeah, I was ranked, 10th in the world and actually had a really good season. But the other two Americans were top 3 at the first 2 World Cups, and they just absolutely crushed it, and they earned those spots. And so I'm like sitting at home.
Mm-hmm.
And during this period, I went and visited my brother, and we ended up going and we got matching tattoos. And I'll tell you what we got there. It's very small. You don't know where it is, but it's on my ribs. And I ended up getting the words "Give 'em hell" tattooed on my ribs. And there's a good story as to why. So my grandpa, growing up, every time I did anything in my life, he would tell me, "Give 'em hell." And that was his mantra to us, was just give everything you've got in what you do. And he sent me videos before a bunch of hard races where he said that message. And it really impacted me, because it's about being willing to meet yourself in every moment and give what you've got. And I think, early on, maybe the Olympics, maybe pursuing racing was about getting the flashy tattoo and having the accomplishment and being able to say here, look what I did, and here's what I got for it. But I think for me now, the question I ask is what can I give? And how far am I willing to go to exhaust that potential and to give everything I have while I still have the opportunity to give it?
It's service. It's what am I giving, not what am I extracting from this?
Yeah. And I think when you're looking for what will fill your cup and what will be a worthy pursuit over a long period of time, I think it's a lot about what thing are you doing where you're giving everything, and in that moment, you're enjoying it, right? The deep engagement with the activity, whether it's giving back to the community, whether it's giving everything in an interval on your bike, where that act is so illuminating that at the end, you have gotten something.
Yeah.
It's a byproduct.
It's also, kind of this weird thing again, where you might trip yourself up because it's give them hell, give it everything you've got. That pushes all the buttons of I'm going to overtrain and I'm going to live in a cabin and be if I'm going to give them hell, then here's what I need in order to do that. But it's you're coming at this more mature, more expansive, to give it all you've got requires that holistic piece where you are making room for going on bike rides with all of these, women and girls that you're trying to get, into the sport, and you're working with these your life is much bigger now, right? Giving it all you've got means serving all of these different things, all of these value buckets that, allow you to sustain your athletic career, but give your life meaning.
It goes back to maybe what we talked about with the coaching evolution, where at the beginning, maybe it's about giving them hell. And then you kind of have this period in the middle where things become more complex, and you learn that there's actually a lot more to that. There's a lot more chutes and ladders in the activity of giving everything you've got than you can see from the beginning. But I think when you come back to it, that is still true. That still holds water. That giving everything is part of what makes a pursuit worthwhile and a worthy use of your time. But now I think I have a bit more nuance and maybe a bigger kind of landscape with which to apply that mindset.
You mentioned legacy earlier. What is, if you had to define your gravestone, or what does your epitaph say? What is it? What is the higher purpose distilled down to a single thought?
No pressure. I don't know that I'd put "send it" on my gravestone, but maybe something along those lines, that really, she went for it. She held nothing back in going after what was important. And maybe that's what evolves most as an athlete over time and just as a person, as you age, as you start to get a more textured view of what's important. It's not just this result, or it's really people. It's how you spend your time. It's what you give back, the community that you surround yourself with. It's all of these ties that kind of bind us all together that really are important and matter. But I think at the end of the day, the best way to honor that view of the world is to go all in on those things that matter.
Yeah. She really sent it.
She really sent it.
You know, it's funny.
Yeah.
Like send it is basically like the 2025 Yabra version of your grandfather's phrase, like give him hell. It's the same thing, basically.
Yeah, maybe I'll put give him hell on the tombstone. That would be a surprise. I think I'm a pretty straight edge person in general. So I think that was also, it's a bit of a surprise. But yeah, I think my grandpa was onto something there, and he had a very good long life and imparted a lot of wisdom and lessons to his grandchildren. So, well,
you have imparted a lot of lessons and wisdom today. I adore you. I'm such a fan of everything that you're doing, and I can't wait to see how this all unfolds. So I'm very excited for you, and I appreciate you coming here today. What's the next race? Like what does the calendar look like in the near future?
Well, first, thank you so much. It's really an honor to get to sit down and spend this much time with you. The next race, I have a US Cup, and then the World Cup will start in April. So the first World Cup's in Brazil, and that will be kind of the first big reveal of the new team kit and my first opportunity to send it.
What is the color scheme of the bike?
Ooh,
or is that like a big secret? Like you're brilliant at how you kind of drip out these like things on social media. Like you don't just make one big announcement. Like these are all like staged.
Well, it might take longer to get kits and bikes painted than people expect. So there's some art to it. But it'll be a purple sparkle galaxy vibe. So we're having fun with it.
Wow. Okay. All right, cool. And when's the next training camp with Chelsea Sodaro?
Oh, hopefully soon. We're going to have to get out.
You guys just could do like retreats. You would have so many people who would want to join you.
Yeah, it's been a really amazing friendship. And I think there's a lot of value in spending time and talking with people that share such a big part of your identity and can help shed light from a different direction, which you do as well.
Yeah, cool. Well, come back anytime.
Thank you.
This was really delightful. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you.
Peace.